Brazilian Shirt Name Podcast with Dotun Adebayo and Tim Vickery.
Yeah, welcome to the Brazilian Shirt Name Podcast. It's all my fault that we're a little bit late, but we'll get cracking on. Oh, and by the way, we're going to win the cup. We're going to win the cup. E-I-A-D-O, we're going to win the cup. Tim Vickery, the Legendino, is in Rio and he's wagging a dismissive finger at me. What have I done to deserve that, mate?
I'm not so sure after this draw. We'll get into that. I suppose because we're talking about the draw, then we have to start late and we have to go on for longer and longer and longer. And we have to give you a spurious prize for your domination of technology. Well done. But I think it's so important to wait until now to do something on the draw, because everyone else just raced to do it on Friday and they didn't have the most important information. Just to give you just a little example, as soon as Scotland drew Brazil, my phone is tapping away and Scotland's phoning me and so on. And hang on. This game, we don't know what time it's going to be. We don't know where it's going to be. It could be Atlanta, under the roof, air conditioning, or it could be Miami. It's Miami, 6 o'clock in the afternoon. They are going to fry those Scottish people who don't even start white. They're like blue. They've got to spend a whole week on the beach just to turn white. There will not be enough sunscreen for Scotland to cope with something like this. So that whole thing, I personally, my view on the draw is that your group opponents are probably less relevant than in any previous World Cup, given the fact that 3 will go through from a lot of groups. What I think is absolutely vital is when you're playing, where you're playing, not only in the group phase, but in your path to the final. And now we know that. So now we can really go into a deep dive of what's happened with this draw.
From the window with us podcast. Joe Gould, as you know, regular on the Brazilian Shirt Name Podcast, and for the first time, Brandon Riff, he's co-host on the pod as well. So welcome to it, Brandon. Joe, welcome back, as it were. Look, a lot to talk about. Tim's already kind of laid out the landscape, but I'm rather concerned for any red-headed Scotsmen that might be getting a game on the Scottish team if they're to play in Atlanta or Miami. Do you have any good news of cheer for those who perhaps weren't made in the shade, if you know what I mean?
I think for the good news is that there are 2 matches in Boston. So it is certainly cooler in Boston than it will be. And I also think there's a nice benefit to not having to travel for your first 2 matches. So being in a central location, and there are a lot of teams that are traveling to 3 different cities and 2 different countries. That is a benefit. For Miami, find a pool. There are a lot of them down there. It's a nice stadium in Miami for sure as well. And for fans going, the nice thing about that stadium as well is it's a little bit enclosed at the top. It's not just a wide open stadium like some of these other large stadiums are going to be. So there is some shade cover, but it is going to be hot.
Yeah, Joe, there's one thing that I can concur with Brandon about, because the first time I arrived in Florida would have been 1980. In fact, December 1980, on my way to Jamaica. And I took Laker Airways. Laker Airways was owned by a guy called Freddie Laker, later become Sir Freddie Laker. And he was the person who started off budget airlines. You know, he was the first person to start off budget airlines. We owe it all to him if we can afford to fly to places which would have been excluded from us once upon a time. And the reason I'm telling this story is because Freddie Laker, for, I can't remember, it was something like 90 quid in those days. Basically, you had an option as to whether you would have food served on the plane or not. If you want to go real budget, then you get across the Atlantic. London to New York was like 58 quid, 70 quid, when before it had been like 300 or 400 quid. So that was a huge difference. Anyway, the first time I'm flying to Florida, I'm flying into, this happened both, I've seen it in Miami as well, but I flew into, what's the next one? Tampa, Florida. And the first thing I see, because it's a nighttime flight, Tim, I swear to God, the first thing you notice as you descend in southern Miami is, fuck me, the amount of swimming pools. All you see is turquoise, lit up turquoise oblongs all over the place. Honestly, it was amazing. I thought, shit, we're way behind. But he's right on that, isn't he, Joe?
Yeah, he is definitely right on that. There's a bajillion of them down there, so that'll be enjoyable.
But that's not going to help the Scots, does it?
No, it's a pity it's not water polo. You know, they might have more of a chance.
I will say, though, Miami is a great place for Scotland and their supporters because Miami Beach and South Beach are a party, and you know that Scotland is bringing the party.
Right. So they're there for the party, not to win the World Cup. Some of them
I'm not saying
hopefully, I mean, you hope from their point of view, because one win might be enough to see you through, you know. So you hope that, you know, that because they start off against Haiti, you hope that they got 3 points in the bag, and then you know they can actually get through to the second round for the first time ever. So it is an opportunity for them, but the Brazil game is going to take a lot out of them.
The good news is they'll be sitting here, Brandon, looking at Haiti and say, well, we are going to get the 3 points that Tim Vickery predicted, and then we don't have to meet Brazil again until the final. Do you know what I mean?
I think that Haiti is a better team than a lot of people think, and that's might be a little bit surprising as well. And you know, I agree that that's probably the team that Scotland is circling and saying, let's win this match. And if we get 3 points out of this, that might be enough, and maybe we can squeak another draw out of the group. But they're certainly going to be the team that people are looking at and saying they should finish bottom of the group. But Haiti is a team that Joe and I talk about a lot as a team we like and has a lot of talent, and is a little bit of an unknown in CONCACAF because they've been below teams like Costa Rica and Panama and Honduras and others. And Haiti actually coming into the final window in November didn't even look like they were going to qualify. And they had a really strong November window and got the job done. But Haiti's definitely a team that Joe and I have liked for some time, and I think we're both eager to see how they perform at the World Cup.
I commentated once when they got a draw with Italy. This is going back 2013, I think. I didn't see that one coming. It is like the classic game for the Scots to get wrong, isn't it? Like Costa Rica in 1990. You know, the Scots in the conditions of a World Cup, they are totally capable of losing to Haiti and beating Brazil. No, we've seen it so many times before. The 78 campaign, when they thought they were going to win it, you know, they lose to Peru, they draw with Iran, they're out unless they thrash Holland, and they nearly do. So it's going to be another World Cup adventure. What are your favourite things of the draw, both of you? What kind of leaps out most?
I'm a big fan of Group I, actually. That's one that immediately stood out to me. I think the group with France, Senegal, Norway, and whoever comes out of the rest of the world playoff, probably Iraq, but it could be Suriname or Bolivia as well. That group, I think, will be quite tough. I think it's fun that France and Senegal are in the same group. I remember a couple months ago, I was just thinking about various permutations, and I posted that what if France and Senegal are in the same group, and then lo and behold, here it is. So that's gonna be a fun one. I think too, in terms of like debutantes at this World Cup, I actually think Jordan has a very good group. I think they got a good draw. I think there's a possibility that they could get out of that group. They're in a group with Argentina, Algeria, and Austria. I would not be surprised if Jordan somehow finds a way to successfully navigate that group, whether it's in a third place spot maybe, or potentially even in second place. I don't think Austria is as good as maybe people think, and Algeria has some struggles as well. So those are a few of the things that stood out to me immediately.
Is there an obvious group of death? I can't see it, and particularly because of the format, which, let's remind people, 3 out of the 4 teams in a group will get through. Is there any obvious group of death?
I think Joe's done it.
Yeah,
the one with France, Senegal, and Norway. Although you do think Norway are going to melt, aren't they?
Well, but they've got some star, attractions, and not least up front, as you know. You see, I'm not sure that that's a group of death, because I think France, Senegal, and Norway will get through. Whoever comes in, whether it be Suriname or Iraq, I can't see them.
It's not all the third place teams that go through.
Oh,
Right.
it's
It's only
not.
the top 8.
No, it's 8 of the 12 groups.
Yeah.
So there is a jeopardy there.
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
And I waited maybe 11 minutes before I decided to get into some numbers here. But, just thinking through that 8 of 12 that get through, it's the same percentage as when you think of an AFCON or a Euro, where you have 4 of the 6 third place teams getting through. It's the same ratio. So if you're trying to think, is 3 points going to be enough, or you're going to need 4 points? I think you can look at those tournaments and see what has happened in the group stage to determine. And I think we've seen a few instances where 3 points is enough. And I think we've seen others where 3 points is not enough. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see where that break is. And then, of course, I had to mention the number of permutations for the knockout stage in the round of 32. There are 495 possible combinations for the third place teams, and FIFA has planned out all 495 routes. So it is going to be interesting to track that.
That factor of the 3 points, I think that puts extra pressure on the Scotland-Haiti game.
Yeah.
Because, and Scotland will remember the World Cup in 74, which was a tough group. It was them, Brazil, Yugoslavia, and the then Zaire, now DR Congo. And Scotland played Zaire first and kind of eased their way in the competition with a 2-0 win and went out on goal difference, because everyone beat Zaire by more, and the other games were drawn. So I'm sure there'll be a thought in Scotland: we've got to win, and if possible, we've got to win by as many as we can. And that could backfire, couldn't it?
Yeah, and I think that's not unique to that group as well, knowing how teams are going to be compared across groups, and goal differential certainly will come into play. And you look at some of the smaller teams, perhaps some of the debutantes like a Curacao, that could come into play there. Joe is probably a little more optimistic on Jordan than I am. But maybe a Panama, I think there are teams that came out of pot 4 that I think if others feel they are perhaps weaker, I think you could see some teams really pushing to score a lot of goals.
So you don't think that Jordan are going to be the wolf of the World Cup? Jordan!
I think that Jordan got a good draw, as Joe said. I definitely agree with that. And I think there's definitely a path for them to even get out of the group. But just from a overall quality, looking at the entire field, I would probably put them towards the back. But again, I agree with Joe wholeheartedly that they got a pretty good draw.
That's the group that fascinates me most, actually, the Argentina group, because part of the thing behind the draw was separate Argentina and Spain.
Right.
So they win the groups, they can only meet in the final. But as luck would have it, and this is the luck of the draw, if one finishes first in their group and one finishes second, they meet in the very first knockout round. It's unreal, man. And there is considerable incentive for Argentina to finish first in the group, because of their 3 group games, they got 2 with air conditioning. If you finish first, they've got 2 of their knockout games, of the 4 knockout games, also with air conditioning. Now, that's going to make a difference as you go through the tournament. You're going to take less out of yourself, but it could mean a meeting with Spain so early in the competition, and that would be wild. It only takes like one little thing, one drawn game by one of them here and there, and they finish second in the group. And we got Argentina, Spain in the second round. Unbelievable.
So who do you think would be more likely to finish in second place? Because I have a hard time seeing Argentina dropping points in that group. Spain maybe against Uruguay, maybe, but I struggle with.
The only thing there is the best laid plans and all the rest of it. I mean, do you remember Argentina went into the last World Cup with the longest unbeaten run, possibly in history? And who was the first? The first game, yeah, it's 3 points. 3 points. Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia beat them. So once no plan survives contact with the enemy.
Yeah, no, this is true. And so while we're kind of talking a little bit about Scotland and Haiti, I mean, on the flip side, I think Haiti also has to have that match circled too, right? As the one for them, right? And in their defense, they will be tough, especially up top. They've got really big players, got really fast players. They could be a really tricky opponent for Scotland. They really could. And Haiti has not conceded a goal yet since Hannes Delcroix has started in their back line. So will Scotland be the first ones to? I mean, they'll probably have games in March, but I think the point exists that that they've turned things around, and like Brandon already mentioned, they had a really good November window. So I don't know if there'll be a rollover for Scotland.
And I will say, we were talking about just indoors and outdoors, and Atlanta is one of the stadiums that does have the air conditioning indoors. Haiti, from a schedule and time standpoint, they made out pretty well. They're playing at 9 p.m. local time in both Boston and Philly. So they're going to be playing when it's dark, when it's cooler, and then they're going to have a game in the air conditioning. So really all three of their group stage games, they're not going to have the heat during the day that perhaps some other teams will. So I agree, though, Joe, like for Haiti, you say, okay, we need 3 points or maybe 4, but at least 3. And I agree that Scotland game is probably going to be the one that they're circling, just knowing that Morocco had a great run in 2022 and Brazil is Brazil.
Are they going to have any support in the stadium?
Haiti?
Yeah.
I think they will.
Yeah.
How are they going to get in?
I'd have thought so.
It won't be people coming in from the island though. It'll be people who already live here.
Yeah, I think there are a lot. I'm in the New York area. There's definitely a larger Haitian population in that area, and Boston and Philly are both 4 hours or less from there. So I do think they're going to have good support.
Yeah, well, we know that from the Fugees, don't we? That Haiti's in the house. But let's not beat around the bush. The eye-catching fixture of that Group C is Brazil versus Morocco. We haven't said a word about that. You see, Morocco, from what we saw of them in the last World Cup, was it in the World Cup or the Euros?
Yeah, the World Cup. Yeah.
It wasn't the World Cup.
You don't get Morocco in the Euros. They're not allowed.
Well, you get Australia in the Eurovision Song Contest, so anything's possible, mate. We'll see if the Eurovision Song Contest survives its latest attempt. But anyway, the Brazil versus Morocco. How do you call that, Tim?
It's a best of 3. Morocco, not long ago, they won the Under-20 World Cup. It's a big moment. And they beat Brazil on the way. And then in the Under-17 World Cup, just a couple of weeks ago, Brazil eliminated Morocco with the last kick of the game. So this one is the best of 3. Brazil's first match after the last World Cup, their first match of this cycle with a caretaker coach was a friendly against Morocco where they got beat. It is. The fact that it's the first game, I think, means that it may well be quite cautious.
Yeah, I think that's definitely possible.
What are you looking at, a draw then, or what?
Well, I think Brazil will consider themselves narrow favourites, but I don't think anyone would. I think Morocco would be happy with a draw, and Brazil wouldn't be distraught with a draw. Normally, maybe, but in the conditions of this World Cup, where those third place sides will go through, 8 of the 12 will go through, that gives you a little bit of cushion. So I wonder how Morocco will approach this. It was a very, very cautious model that they used in the last World Cup, wasn't it? It was very, very cautious. I actually found it quite a difficult watch a lot of the times. And I felt that there was a team there that were capable of more. Now they are World Cup semi-finalists last time around. They've broken that ceiling for Africa. They are under 20 world champions. We'll have to see what happens in the AFCON as well. It's coming up. But I wonder if they will be obliged to be a little bit more expansive. I don't know. I don't know what their mentality will be going into the World Cup. If now there will be a kind of obligation to win with a little bit of style along the way.
I think for Morocco, go ahead, Joe.
No, you go. You're good.
No, I was just going to say, I think they're an interesting case because they've been wildly successful recently, but their competition has not been great. They were in a group that they really just dominated start to finish, and they scored a lot of goals, more than you would typically expect from Morocco. And I think they were more open, as you described, in that environment. But I also think that once you get to the World Cup and you're playing Brazil, I think we're going to see more of the traditional Morocco is what I would expect.
I think just to piggyback off of that too, I think there's one player in particular for Morocco that is going to be key to a lot of their success, and that is Hakimi. And he's already set to miss AFCON. He's injured, which is really unfortunate for them, especially since they're hosting that competition. And so, yeah, I think how they come out of AFCON is actually going to influence how they do in the World Cup, because I think there's going to be a mentality piece there, and again with reintegrating Hakimi back into the side, and he's obviously the captain and the leader there. It's going to be really curious to see how they do end up approaching this, because I'm not sure anybody really knows how they're going to try to tackle it at this moment in time. But yeah, it's going to be fascinating.
I like the look of that Group F as well, I've got to say. I do like the look of that. I can see, I know 3 of the 4 teams are clear. And of those 3 teams, I can't think of a single fixture that I wouldn't watch. Netherlands versus Japan, that's a must-see. Japan and Tunisia, well, who would bet against that? Netherlands versus Tunisia. It just gets better and better and better, that group. I don't know what the 4th team is like. And I can't pick a winner out of those 3. Can either of you?
Yeah, I think the Netherlands probably would be my pick. I actually have tickets to the Netherlands-Tunisia game that ended up being the one that we got. So I'll be in Kansas City for that, which I'm looking forward to. But yeah, I agree with you. I think that's going to be a really fun group. Some very exciting ties. You have a lot of Japanese players actually play in the Netherlands, which makes it even more interesting. And I think, if I remember correctly, there is quite a large population of Tunisians in the Netherlands as well. So just interesting storylines.
Yeah,
I think Japan are fascinating, really fascinating. I mean, Japan in the last World Cup, they did something that I don't think I'd ever seen it before. Because over the last few years, we've been thinking in terms of control of the game. And Japan really weren't particularly interested. And then suddenly they would flick a switch without making any personnel changes. And for the next 10 minutes, they were the best side in the world. They beat Spain that way. They beat Germany that way. I saw them do it recently against Brazil. They were 2 down at half time and won 3-2. They just flick this switch and then suddenly bang. They have these magical 10 minutes, and then they go back into their shell. It's a completely different conception of football from the one that we were used to. So I'm fascinated to see what they're going to do. One that fascinates me as well is England's route. When the group, was it Croatia, Ghana, and Panama, is certainly not easy. But then let's assume that they win the group. Let's assume. You're looking at fairly early on. You've got to make some of the assumptions about others winning the group, but you're looking at a trip to Mexico to face Mexico in the Aztec. You're looking at a Brazil quarterfinal and an Argentina semi-final, and that really would be, in the conditions in which this tournament is going to be played, that would be scaling Everest the hard way, wouldn't it?
Phew. Of those fixtures, I can see Croatia. I mean, let's see what Croatia are like with an aging Modric, but I could see Croatia causing a problem for England. Not, a grievous uh, problem, but nevertheless a challenge. And Croatian fans are amongst the most vocal of all the um, fans at the World Cup, and I'm sure they'll be there in force. And there are quite a lot of Croatians, from what I understand, in the United States in any case. But I bet they'll take travelling support across the Atlantic as well. Ghana, well, you tell me what Ghana is coming into this World Cup. It's a long way away from the Ghana that made the quarterfinals in the 2010 World Cup, isn't it?
Yeah, I actually, personally, I think that England has it not quite as difficult as they could have, maybe. Yes, Ghana, Croatia will be their toughest test for sure. Panama and Ghana, I can't see England dropping points in those games. I just can't. And I don't know if Brandon agrees with me or not, but it's, for me, England is a clear favorite in this group.
Yeah, I agree with you in the group. I think looking at the knockout stage for England, I think playing Mexico in Mexico City is going to be really tough.
Yeah.
I think that's going to be a wild environment, extremely, extremely strong home support. I think you're probably going to see stronger home support for Mexico in Mexico than you do for the United States, frankly. And that's just kind of the environment of Mexico. So I think that's a really, really challenging path. And, if you were asking me to project what I think is going to happen, that would be an area I think could be problematic for England. So I think the group will prove to be not all that difficult. I agree with Joe. Ghana and Panama, I am not expecting to challenge for a top 2 position, but I think that's one of the benefits of these small groups is you're only playing 3 matches. So one win can change the whole group around. So I do actually like Panama. And I think getting drawn with Ghana, who is a team that I think looked good in qualifying, but has had some concerns for me at least. I don't hate that for Panama. And I think, that's, looking at games in the same circle, they play them first. And I think Panama is going to definitely look at that as an opportunity where they can get points. And I would not be surprised to see Panama get out of the group and get to the knockout stage.
Interesting. What about the home teams? They all seem to have easy or not so difficult groups, dare I say. No disrespect, but look at the USA in Group D against Paraguay.
I think that's tough. I think this
You
is
reckon?
I do, yes.
I agree with you.
Don't go around underestimating Paraguay. Really don't do it. You underestimate them, they'll give you a bloody nose. Australia, I saw them a couple of times recently and they were terrible. But maybe they can raise their game, mate. And the other one could be Turkey, which might be the best Turkish side. We'll have to wait and see who comes through from that. But yeah, I mean, Canada and Mexico, the groups don't look too difficult. How's the draw for the States gone down back home?
I think it's gone down pretty well, if we're being honest. I think a lot of people are pretty content and I would dare say even happy with that draw. I think it could have been way worse. And given the form that we're in at the moment, I think we're reasonably happy with that. We seem to have kind of turned a corner. And so if that continues, there's really no reason why, especially playing at home, that we shouldn't get out of this group. Like there really isn't. And if we don't, that's an absolute
not getting out of the group would be a nightmare, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Wow. But President Trump would have you hung, drawn, and quartered, obviously.
I think the one concern is if it is Turkey that does end up getting in that group, and like Tim mentioned, the Paraguay, don't underestimate them, and even Australia to a certain degree, right? So it's a very favorable draw, but at the same time, there feels like there's a lot of unknown. Actually, it feels very open, like this group, in a sense, and we'll have to see what that 4th team is. If it's Turkey, I think that changes things a lot. If it's somebody like Kosovo, which I personally think it could be, then we're looking at something different here. So, that's my take on Group D. And then in terms of the draws for Mexico and Canada, I don't know. Canada, it could be Italy, could be Wales in there. I think those are two really tough teams. I think Switzerland's playing really well right now. I don't think it's going to be that straightforward for Canada, if I'm being honest. I think it could be a little bit tougher than people think. And then for Mexico, look, they got a pretty favorable draw, but Son Heung-min running at that Mexican defense, I think is going to be absolute terror. And Mexico hasn't been playing that well recently, so there are some concerns there. So we'll have to see.
Yeah, they're not very good, are they? They're really not very good. But you wonder with the home advantage, especially the kind of altitude of Mexico City,
correct,
that might tip the balance their way in the early stages, including in this potential game against England as well.
Yeah,
but Canada aren't going to have any problems getting through that Group B, are they?
I think it's more difficult than people think, honestly. I think I could see. I personally think Qatar will finish bottom of that group, and it could be a second or third place spot for Canada, depending on who comes in. If it's Italy or Wales, that will make it tough for Canada, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think Canada is probably going to get through, but I think it's going to be interesting to see which Path A team comes through. If it's Italy, Italy, I think, would be favored to top this group, but they also have had their struggles against Norway. Wales is also going to be tough. And as Joe mentioned, Switzerland has looked really good in qualifying. So I think Canada will be able to get through the group, but I agree with Joe. Qatar probably bottom, but that Canada is probably going to need to beat Qatar, because if they don't do that, I don't see a path for them to get through if they don't beat Qatar.
Looking at this draw, I can't see. I know it's just stage one, obviously, but I can't see a South American World Cup victory. Can you?
Well, they have won it every time that it's been in North America. So there are reasons to be cheerful, and some of them, Colombia, I think, will be reasonably happy with their draw. Could be another Colombia-England meeting. That's something that could happen.
Portugal versus Colombia.
Well, I wonder what he's going to do with Cristiano Ronaldo.
Well, he's got to be the joker in the pack, really.
When was the last tournament goal that he scored? Sometimes in the serious games they've looked better without him, but they won't be without him. You never know. One of the things that fascinates me about World Cups is it's always like time speeded up. Teams suddenly come together, or they suddenly fall apart. Going into England's World Cup in '66, who can imagine that England will win the tournament without Jimmy Greaves? It's unthinkable. Who's Jeff Hurst? Who's he? Wasn't he playing in midfield for West Ham a couple of years ago? And then, he emerges in the course of the competition. So I love that aspect of the World Cup. And I love the World Cup in general. And I did thoroughly enjoy myself writing down the match schedule of the whole thing. But I did have to have a lie down afterwards. It was very tiring. And this kind of leads me to a question. Have we gone too far? And is this an exercise in overblown megalomania? Because there are things that could go wrong here, aren't there? The Club World Cup, with all of those interruptions for weather, what was it? It was 6 separate interruptions, 7 hours delays. That's not good. And even worse to me is that on some of the games, I think there's games at Los Angeles at midday, Los Angeles. Surely this is insanity. This is insanity. Do you think there's a risk, Joe, Brandon? Is there a risk that this is megalomania gone mad?
I do have some concerns that we could see a few of these teams with potentially some tight scorelines. So, like I'm looking at Group E, right, with Curacao, and as much as I love Curacao, unfortunately, I think they got a really brutal draw, and I'm worried about them, that there's potentially going to be some higher score lines there, and in terms of when games are, I mean, the game that I'm going to in Kansas City, I've been to Kansas City in the summertime before, and it is disgusting. It is not anything that you want. Nobody wants to be outside. And unfortunately, while I was there, I was on the sidelines watching kids play soccer for 12 hours in the day. And you're just dripping without even moving, and so, yeah, it is a concern. I think FIFA announced today or over the weekend, maybe, or when the schedule came out, they're already implementing 2 3-minute water breaks, 1 per half, for every single game, regardless of what time of day it's at. So,
yeah,
that's going to break up the flow of the game too, and play a factor as well. Sorry, Brandon.
And just thinking back to Qatar 2022 as well, and that was the heavy criticism, is like it's 110 degrees in Fahrenheit in Qatar, and they moved it to November and December, and all the stadiums were air conditioning, and I was there, and it did not feel during the games. You were not extremely hot. Like the temperature and the climate was reasonable, actually. And you have a lot of these stadiums that are they're built for American football. They're massive open stadiums. The stadium in Boston and Philly, even in New York to an extent, and some of the others as well. Seattle's probably a little bit cooler, but the stadium is set up that way. But San Francisco for sure. You've got a lot of these stadiums that are just going to be extremely, extremely hot. And I think they've tried to manage the times, but yeah, it's a lot. It's, 16 host cities. I mean, it's a lot. And the Americas are not small. Like there's a lot of travel, and I think the conditions are probably going to be as challenging as we've seen at a tournament recently. So I agree with Joe about teams like Curacao and their draws and others, but I think some of the weather is going to be more of a conversation than perhaps it should be for a tournament like this.
This question here from Kevin, because it is very, very pertinent on the quality of the pitches, because I know for the Club World Cup a few months ago, some of the pitches were very, very poor. And there was one where the ball hardly bounced. What are they going to be like in 6-7 months' time?
Brandon?
I mean, I think in American football, they generally gravitate towards grass and more natural surfaces. There's no real turf surfaces anymore. So that bounce, large bounces, you probably won't see that as much. But different fields have certainly different technology as well. I know in Atlanta, for example, the one that's air conditioned and indoors, the pitch is different. They're pellets, they're things that kick up and are intended to help with footing. But the one that I would actually be a little bit concerned about, which might be shocking to hear, is actually where the final is going to be played at MetLife. And MetLife in North Jersey is heavily criticized in the National Football League for their footing, and players don't like playing there. And there are some injuries that have happened, and I'm kind of surprised they actually chose that for the final, because it's New York and it's large and there's capacity. It's a massive stadium on the side of the New Jersey Turnpike that I don't think is the best pitch for a World Cup final.
I think it was probably as a consequence of how dreadful the final was in 1994, when it was on the other side, wasn't it? And it was just blazing heat. It was possibly the worst World Cup final we've had, Brazil and Italy.
Yeah.
I was at an event a few years ago with both of the coaches, Pajeda of Brazil and Sacchi of Italy, and they were saying it was just it was unreal, unreal, just too hot. Brazil's star striker Romario was against Franco Baresi, who'd had a knee operation during the course of the tournament, And I couldn't believe it when I saw Baresi come out. You're going to face Romario. Put him in his pocket. And the two coaches were talking about this, and the conclusion they both came to, it was better to be injured than tired. And it really did detract from the occasion. So I think they've taken it over to the East. Italy were also very angry about they played their semi-final on the East Coast, and they had to make that long trip across. So I think they've tried to avoid that. And we've got both of the semi-finals in air-conditioned stadiums, Dallas and Atlanta. And then the final East Coast where the weather... But that could go awry as well. I mean, our producer, Mark Machado, was in New York for the semi-final of the Club World Cup. It was Fluminense and Chelsea. And he had to leave early in New York because it was too hot.
I think they got it wrong. I think when you look at American stadiums and capacity and comfortability, I think the two semifinal hosts are actually probably the premier stadiums, in my opinion, in Atlanta and Dallas. And to have a final outdoors in New Jersey in the middle of the day, in the middle of July, I think it's going to be sweltering. I think the semifinal venues are going to be good. And even from a pitch perspective also, I think Dallas and Atlanta are probably the two premier, in my opinion, and maybe LA to an extent now that SoFi is built. But I think they got the final choice wrong.
The final of the Copa America last year was Argentina and Colombia, and there was this mass invasion by the Colombians, and the game was the Colombian fans, and the game was delayed. And you wondered then if, from a security point of view, if the American policing operation and so on was used to dealing with an event that matters that much. Obviously, America has huge sporting events, but your sporting culture is kind of entertainment. It's not quite the importance of identity that a national team football game is when you've got someone like Colombia. How do you think the crowd control will be?
I think it'll be okay. I'm hoping that they learned from Copa America, right? I'm hoping that FIFA was watching that and realizing, okay, we need to do a little bit better here. We'll see, obviously. Whoever it ends up being, right? I feel like, and I could be totally off base with this, but I feel like if it's an Argentina-Spain final, I don't know if there'll be a ton of issues. And I could be totally off base with that, but I'm hoping
certainly much further for the Argentines to come out as they did in Brazil 2014, when they just cornered the market in beaten up seventh-hand trucks and cars, and they just came in mass. It's a bit further for them to do that.
I think the one thing that I agree from a culture standpoint, it is certainly different in the United States. I think the other thing that CONCACAF was not really prepared for, and I don't think U.S. security was prepared for, is the amount of people without tickets trying to get into the stadium. That is not something you typically see at American sporting events, whether it be a basketball game, a football game. You typically don't see that where you have hordes of people that do not have tickets trying to actually get into the stadium. So I think that was a bit of a shock and a surprise for security. I think FIFA organizing the event and the scale of the World Cup, I do agree with Joe. I think FIFA will be better prepared, but that was certainly something that the security guards are like, these people don't have tickets. Why are they trying to come in? This is crazy. And just weren't prepared to handle anything like that.
Dotun has left us with a quite provocative little question here, which I will now relate to you. He says that the US has a history of arriving late. I've no idea what he's referring to there. How long till they start to get excited about the tournament? And can you use they in a country of so many, when there's so many million of you? Can you use this generalization?
Right. You guys have asked, I think you've asked me that every time I've been on the show, is the US excited yet? Is the US excited yet? And I think now that the draw has happened, I know in my personal circles, I've had a lot more conversations recently about it. And so I think it's now finally starting to kick off. I still am lacking a lot of the marketing efforts in seeing those in where I live, and I don't live in a large place. I mean, so maybe that's par for the course. Brandon lives in a much larger city than I do, so maybe he's seen more. But I there are a few things that I feel like they've missed, right? Like, yes, we've got the FIFA World Cup logo on the Coca-Cola bottles now. That's a big thing. But I feel like there were opportunities that could have made this much more exciting for a lot of people. And yes, they would have been expensive and FIFA would have had to shell out. But why are we not putting and I was telling Brandon this on Thanksgiving, we have that huge Macy's Day Thanksgiving parade. But there was no float, no mention of the World Cup in that. But there are millions of viewers, millions of Americans who tune into that every single year. What a genius opportunity that would have been to place something, and even an ad, a television ad, maybe not even a float, but an ad. And there was nothing. So
yeah, I agree. The marketing has been short. I was in New York City recently, and not in really touristy areas, just throughout the city, and you don't really know that you wouldn't know that anything's going on or is upcoming. And I think you see a little bit more in some of the more populated Times Square areas and so forth. But the World Cup's also not taking place in New York City. It's 45 minutes down the road in New Jersey. And so I think the marketing has not yet been there. I think the other thing that has put somewhat of a damper on it for me is just the ticket prices and the challenge in getting tickets, I think has made it less accessible. And, and thinking about what am I going to do? Just thinking back, as I mentioned, I'd gone to Qatar before the draw. We had, I think, 8 games that we had been able to purchase tickets for, and they were all in a similar location, and we were centralized in a hotel, and we were excited for the draw. Which games are we going to get? Joe had that excitement with the one that he's got, but it has been much, much more difficult to get tickets. And I think, and thinking through that, you're hosting, you want to get the chance to be able to go to the games, and I think that accessibility has proved challenging. So I'm thinking about where am I going to watch the games and how many can I get to if I'm able to get tickets. But I think that has also put somewhat of a damper on the excitement.
Yeah,
and one of the joys of the World Cup is concentration. The world concentrating in one place, which obviously you had in intense form in Qatar. But even saying Brazil in 2014, it's a giant country, but pretty much everyone who came, you would meet them on the main drag at Copacabana in Rio. You would. We won't have that this time round, will we?
I think maybe in pockets, depending on the city. But it's not going to be like that. Like, Copacabana and South Beach in Miami are not necessarily comparable, but that's an area where there's a big beach and lots of restaurants and bars and so forth. And I think you'll have some people there, but the locals, I think, will probably not be interested or interested in other things.
How dependent is it on the US doing well to mobilize? Because it is a US World Cup, isn't it? Of the 104 games, 13 in Canada, 13 in Mexico, and all the rest in the States. So how important do you think, Joe, is it for the US to make progress in the competition?
I think it's important. I don't think that anybody really thinks that the US is going to win it. So the expectations going into this, people want that to happen, but I think realistically, I don't think they really think that it's going to happen. And so to keep the momentum of the tournament alive, to keep the TVs focused on it, et cetera, I think it's important that the USA does well, right? The other day, members of the US MNT, as Tim, the men's national team, they were while the draw was happening, they were guests on a large morning TV show here called Good Morning America, or was it Today Show, one of the two, anyways. And and that I think is that's all positive reinforcement for the tournament coming here, right? And it exposes it to a demographic that maybe isn't regularly exposed to football in our country. And so in order for things like that to continue, the USA has to do well. And so, that'll be massively important. But I think in terms of attendances and watchability, I think it's going to go off on its own, regardless of how well the U.S. does.
I would agree with that. I think if the U.S. progresses past a certain point, I think some excitement will build, and you'll start to hear some more buzz. But I think the expectations are not high for the U.S. So I do think that, I think in general, people be like, I like the World Cup and I'm going to watch the games and I'm glad that it's on, but I don't really feel any different because it's in the United States versus another country.
For visitors, what about public transport? I mean, that stadium in New Jersey, that can be a swine to get into and get out of.
That one does have some public transport that's accessible. I think there are going to be a lot of stadiums where they're either park and rides or things like that. I think it's going to be much more of a drive to the stadium type environment.
So I was at the USA Uruguay match in Copa America last summer, and that was in Kansas City. And I'll be honest with you, getting to the stadium was a total nightmare. I mean, we were sat in our car for at least an hour trying to get in there, and then parking is expensive. And so hopefully they've thought through that. And like Brandon mentioned, maybe they have some buses to do that, because to get to the stadium in Kansas City, there's no train or anything that will take you out there. You have to go by wheels.
So Joe and I are really selling the tournament, and the U.S. is host.
Yeah.
I know the Boston one. It's in the middle of nowhere.
It is. Yeah, I think the way that the stadiums are situated, you don't really see these stadiums inside of cities. They're typically in the suburbs or on the outskirts of the cities, and depending on the city's public transport system, it's different in each city and each state. There's not a consistent, this is the United States transit system. So I think each kind of stand on their own. But yeah, I think there are going to be a lot of stadiums where driving or Uber or taxi, something along those lines, is going to be the only way to get to the stadium.
I was talking to a Brazilian journal the other day who was at the Club World Cup last year, and he was at a hotel that was within sight of the stadium there in New Jersey. You can see it, but you just can't get there. You can't walk there. It's not possible to walk there. And he was trying to get an Uber or something, and it was like $200. And like I can see it.
Mm-hmm.
200.
I think that's a real concern.
Yeah, it is. And so how people decide to navigate that, I think, will be one of the stories that comes out of this World Cup.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if we have the foresight to really say how that's going to go down yet, but we don't specialize in having mass transit systems per se here, because we are such a large country, right? It's not like
but you used to, I've discovered this the other day. LA used to have one of the best public transport systems in the world. Used to.
Yeah.
And then the motor car took over. If I can close with one question to you both. What is your greatest hope and your greatest fear of the World Cup?
Okay. My greatest hope. My greatest hope. Yeah, that's a good question. My greatest hope is that Norway does well. My greatest fear is that it will be dismissed as poorly run, and with that it has too many teams in it, so the talent is watered down. I don't personally think that will be the case, but I again, going back to like Group E with Curacao, right? Like it would just make me very sad if people dismissed Curacao because they're going up against Germany, who I don't think they've ever played before and at a major tournament or period, and kind of end up getting tossed around, and so then people start to form these opinions that, oh, Curacao doesn't deserve to be there, these X, Y, and Z teams don't deserve to be there. No, they all went through a qualification process. They all deserve to be there, and the draw tells its own tale sometimes.
I think my greatest fear is basically exactly the same as Joe's, because it's something that we've talked about on our podcast a lot, and some of these teams that are qualifying for the first time, and the expansion in certain confederations, especially in Asia. Africa, I think we all felt deserved more teams, and I think the teams that are there are going to perform pretty well. So I think every tournament, you see this all over the place, where it's just we're expanding the field, more games, more money, and where's the tipping point? And my fear is that we have passed that tipping point by moving to 48 teams. I agree that the teams went through a qualification process and do deserve to be there, but I do fear that people are going to look at this tournament and say the quality wasn't there. It's not, a 32 team World Cup, which people were hesitant about expanding to begin with as well. So at some point you get past that where it's like these games are not what a World Cup should be. And I hope we are not at that point, but that is a fear of mine. My greatest hope for the World Cup is probably the opposite, is that you see some of these teams that maybe would not have qualified with a smaller field and make some noise. And you look at a team like Cape Verde that's there for the first time, and I'm sure people are thinking about them the way that they're thinking about maybe a Curacao or Haiti and going, okay, we're glad we got that team, or an Uzbekistan. I hope they make some noise and get to the round of 16 or maybe even a quarterfinal. That would be incredible. So I do hope that we see competitive matches, and the teams that are in pot 4 that you look at and going through the draw saying, okay, I'm kind of glad we have this match in our group stage. I hope they perform better than people expect.
And one final question. Am I talking, and this is in no way a criticism, to the only 2 eccentrics in the world who may well be looking forward more to the delightfully random competition in March with Suriname and Iraq and Bolivia and Jamaica? Are you two the only 2 people in the world who might be looking forward more to that than to the World Cup itself?
We might be. We might be, yeah. We're really looking forward to March. It's going to be a lot of fun to see how it all plays out for sure, and to figure out who will fill out the rest of these groups. And let's go Suriname.
Brandon, guilty as charged.
I'm probably a little bit less excited than Joe. I'm certainly excited about the World Cup, but I think just seeing teams from I'm always a fan of seeing teams from different confederations come together and play each other, whether it be in the World Cup, whether it be in a qualifying process, whether it be in a friendly. I think you have these confederations that with the establishment of the Nations League, you see so much inside the confederations themselves where teams don't get the opportunity to prove themselves more on the global stage. So I'm definitely looking forward to seeing how these teams come together. And I've got numbers and rankings that try to do it, but you never know until they actually play each other. So it's definitely going to be a highlight for us.
Yeah, March is going to be crazy because not only do you have the playoffs, but also, you've got friendlies, as Tim mentioned, and then also the FIFA series is back, which, pits, FIFA brings in these countries, a lot of times smaller countries, to give them meaningful games, and it's cross-confederational, which is fantastic. So, yeah, it's going to be exciting.
So come the World Cup, Joe, after the US, your second team is Norway.
I would say, yeah, probably. Yeah, I would say probably,
Why?
yeah.
Why Norway? What have Norway ever done for you?
Yeah, it's a good question. It really should be Denmark because I have heritage from Denmark, but Norway, for me, it's because I'm a fan of the domestic league there, and I've watched Erling Haaland come all the way through Molde, which is the team that he played for in Norway years ago, and I watched him absolutely destroy that league, and then he went to Austria, destroyed it there at Red Bull Salzburg, and then went to Germany, and now he's at City, and so he's definitely plays a key role in that, but. Honestly, it's Norway for me because of just my love for the country and for the league there. I really enjoy watching the Eliteserien, and I love the little project that they've got going on there that is now bearing great fruit. This is the best generation of Norwegians in quite some time, and it's definitely showing on the field. So,
who's your second team, Brandon?
I actually don't really have a second team. I'm a fan of really teams all over the world. So it's US for me for sure, number one. But certainly some teams I like from Europe, a lot of African teams that I'm a fan of. So I don't have a go-to second team, but I will say that Joe has certainly gotten me much more interested in a lot of the Scandinavian countries and Norway and Iceland and Denmark. And we have a lot of conversations about those on our pod. So I'm certainly pulling for Norway.
Well, let's hope that the Scandinavians don't melt. That's my big fear for the World Cup. That the heat is going to be the villain with possibly disastrous consequences. But let's hope that it is because it is wonderful to bring the world together like this. So I remember the last World Cup. My little grandson, he's 8 now, so he was 5, and he just learned about all those countries. Arabia Saudita, which is nearly how you say Saudi Arabia in Portuguese, Arabia. But he did it instead of an R, he did it with an L. Arabia Saudita, and he collected the sticker albums, and he really got into it. And we've all got World Cups where we fell in love with a game and fell in love with so many different countries in the world. So bring it on. And that was a Brazilian Shirt Name podcast. Thank you very much for watching.
Get in touch with the Brazilian Shirt Name podcast on Twitter at BrazilShirtPod, or you can email us BrazilianShirtNamePod@gmail.com. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe, rate and tell a friend. The Brazilian Shirt Name podcast is an 1129 production.